It's been a year since the Gauteng Health Department was rocked by corruption in COVID contracts. The Health MEC Bandile Masuku lost his job. Presidential spokesperson Kusela Diko stepped down after her husband was implicated. It led to a promise by the Premier to keep contracts open and transparent. But as Mark Heywood writes in the Daily Maverick, monthly spending reports suddenly stopped earlier this year. A promise to tally up the last few months' spending and publish a report has come to nothing. Mark Heywood, who edits a Maverick Citizen and is a health activist of many years, is now raising the alarm, and he joins me now. Mark, great to chat to you. I mean, it's astonishing. It's been a year since that PPE scandal broke. Just wrap it all up for us. We have seen people dismissed. We have seen disciplinary action. But where are we? Is it all wrapped up now?
Good evening, Sally. Yes, we've seen people dismissed, and we've seen, in a very few instances, disciplinary action. But I think it's far from wrapped up, because there's a number of problems. One is that there's no evidence that the corruption is stopping. We still keep on stumbling upon new instances of corruption. Secondly, bodies like the SIU are just completely overwhelmed and frankly unable to investigate everything that journalists and other people unearth. And thirdly, we're still not sitting with anybody actually in prison for these acts of corruption. So I think it's up to all of us, good citizens, honest citizens, to keep up the pressure and to keep on shedding light on what is going on. And as you suggested, Gauteng, I'm afraid, remains an epicenter of corruption in departments of this provincial government. So that is one place where we particularly have to continue to shine a light.
And you've written about these monthly expenditure reports that started coming, and they were very handy and they were very transparent, and they carried on for quite a few months, and then at the end of January, I think it said, they just stopped. Tell us what was useful about those reports, what was in them, and what is your understanding of why they stopped?
Well, they were very useful because Premier David Makura, on the instructions of the National Treasury, from about July or August last year, started to have the provincial treasury produce a monthly set of accounts of all COVID-related expenditure in the province. And these were unaudited figures provided by each department, but you could see in these reports a list of every single transaction, every single tender, who received the tenders, and you could start to kind of join the dots and piece together where the expenditure was. And as a result of those reports, the 431 million rand that was spent by the Gauteng Education Department came to light. The 117 million rand that was spent by the Gauteng Department of Infrastructure Development on so-called fogging of buildings came to light. The dodgy contracts for alternative building technology for hospitals came to light. All of those came to light simply because these reports were put into the public domain, and it was possible for people like you and me and anybody with an interest to look at the figures and to ask questions. But I think the Gauteng government decided that transparency was probably too costly for it politically, because for no reason. You asked what was the reason. Well, the last report was published covering January 2021, and there has been no report since that. And I've been asking since that time directly to the Treasury, when will the next report be published? They keep on saying, we can't tell you, but it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. And then at the beginning of this week, as I was writing this article, the spokesperson for the MEC for Finance in Gauteng said to me, well, they can't give a date because there are new issues, and they're inventing something, which I think is purely an excuse, and saying that the Protection of Private Information Act now might be a barrier to them publishing these reports. So it's not good. It seems to be an actual retreat from openness in government funding, financing.
Certainly worrying. And it's so interesting that you write this article today, because Fatima Hassan, director of the Health Justice Initiative, has also come out with a statement today, and they have been carrying on for months to try and get access to those Ministerial Advisory Committee briefings. They've finally been published today, I understand. But she says, we don't have transparency around our COVID vaccine contracts, and that too is very worrying. And I think you're saying the same thing, is that without transparency, we don't know what's going on, and the track record for around corruption is very worrying. Do you have any specific concerns, or do you think, I mean, could this be a case of just too much to do, completely overburdened? No. Why not?
It couldn't be a case because we pay public servants. We have a provincial treasury which gathers financial information. Every single department, government department, has accountants and financiers who are meant to be totting up this information all of the time. There can be no excuse at all that we're just too busy to be providing openness about what we're spending. It's basic housekeeping, Sally. It's unforgivable. I can only, unless the Gauteng government comes on tomorrow and says to you, Sally, this is the reason why we're not publishing these reports, I can only conclude that it is a cover-up. I can only conclude that they have things to hide, that they have numbers to fix, and that is what they are trying to do. Let me say, in agreement with Fatima Hassan and others, there's nothing to do with COVID that should be shrouded in secrecy. Every meeting about COVID, every contract about COVID, every tender about COVID is meant to be in our public interest. It's meant to be to save our lives, to protect our lives. So there's no reason for keeping ministerial advisories closed or expenditure in the dark. All of it should be out there. And it's so critical, particularly because we know so many people, so many hospitals are struggling for funds, so many schools are struggling for the basics. So we need to be able to evaluate what is going on.
Absolutely. And Mark, thank you so much for bringing this to our attention and for all your good work in health activism. I mean, with the Treatment Action Campaign many years ago, demanding those antiretrovirals when government was stonewalling and stopping all the way. So when Mark Heywood says we've got to pay attention, frankly, I listen. Thank you so much, Mark, health activist and editor of the Maverick Citizen.